And we are live. So hello, everyone. This is going to be about GimletD. It's going to be about a live demo of me installing GimletD, talking about what it is, how does it fit to the Gimlet environment. And yeah, I just cannot not mention the memes that are ongoing in the Kubernetes world, and container ship got stuck. That's super cool. There is plenty of jokes there, guys. So please keep going. All right, so I have prepared a presentation for you, but it's going to be very heavy on the demo side as well. So GimletD, what is that? So GimletD, I just call it a GitOps release manager. You know, Gimlet is about GitOps. Gimlet CLI brought in a bunch of concepts and conventions for the GitOps repository and the workflow and the tooling around it, so you could implement a GitOps strategy at your company relatively faster. You got some guide rails, and then you can follow that. It was primarily made for your laptop usage or calling the Gimlet CLI from CI, so your continuous integration solution. And GimletD takes it one step forward. It builds on the concepts that Gimlet CLI introduced, so you don't have to rewrite anything. It's going to be a plug-and-play plugin. You just plug in GimletD and you get additional features. And that additional feature is basically GimletD takes over the parts where you were rendering your template from the Gimlet manifest and where you were writing the GitOps repository. Now, all that goes to server side, and you would wire Gimlet CLI into your release steps and rollback steps and throwaway environments, and all that could be just deleted from your CI. And if you integrate with GimletD, then all these workflows come out of the box and in like a shared manner. So across all your services, you get the same workflows. Now, what are these concepts that I was talking about? Well, I'm sure I have messed up the screen size again. So now you see more of the screen actually. So what are these concepts? So first of all, the manifest. I am shortly going to show you an application with the Gimlet manifest file if you haven't seen that, and the concepts, the GitOps repository conventions. So let me just jump into my very simplistic application. It has a Docker file. It doesn't do much, as you can see. It's just a daemon that runs in the background and answers some HTTP calls. It's the default Nginx image. I should be using Podtato head from CNCF apps delivery SIG, and I'm going to do that. It's just I was short on time, so I'm just using the bare bone Nginx image. So there is a Docker file. You can build an image out, a container or image out of that, and which is I have a Circle CI pipeline for that. Basically, it does the bare minimum, logs into GitHub container repository, builds the image, tags it with some image tagging strategy, and then push it to GitHub. So that is what CI is doing right now. And if I make a commit, it would generate a new image for me with the actual GitHub SHA as the image tag. It's a simplistic strategy, but it works and scales quite far. And I also have the Gimlet manifest file. Now, if you haven't seen that before, I just do a quick recap here. The Gimlet manifest file does two things. Takes a Helm chart. You can reference it by name or local path, or even from a private GitHub repository. If you have a private chart and you don't have like a chart server, like a Helm chart repository, just a Git repository, and it pins down the version. So name and version, these two logs down your application deployment template, and the values file configures everything that needs to be configured for an application. So these two combined is actually quite powerful. And since this file is in your application source code repository, developers can control, stuff that they should control: replica count, domain names, environment variables. So everything is in developers' hands. There are some more meta information about application name, environment, namespace, blah, 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 blah. But relatively, the Gimlet manifest is this concept. This concept exists in other tools as well, and I think this really captures an application environment. And if this is your staging, you can duplicate this file. You can have a production environment. Since there are variable support, you could even template the name of your application. So whatever variable there is, maybe circle branch would give you kind of like throwaway environments, one environment per branch, per your feature branch. But let's not save this. I just want to show you how to use the Gimlet CLI workflows first, because this is GitOps and you can bootstrap GitOps with Gimlet CLI. So first, as a first step, I'd like to bootstrap GitOps worker loop. I'd like to deploy this application as is without any GimletD. So how about we do that together? So Gimlet CLI has a few groups of commands. If I type Gimlet version, just to verify I have the latest version, Gimlet has a few groups of commands. GitOps is one. Typically use this for managing GitOps stuff, so like file operations, Git commits, and so on. There is a bunch of manifest-related commands, like you will see later on, like how to generate Kubernetes YAML from the Gimlet manifest. You use the manifest group. There is the artifact group and the release group, which is becoming very interesting when we install GimletD in this demo. So let's just quickly run the bootstrap command in the GitOps group. So that is going to be Gimlet GitOps bootstrap. I have a Git repository prepared for this. So if I do a list on GimletD demo GitOps, I will see it's empty, or there's a README file and there's some Git basic stuff. So how about I run bootstrap for an environment, a staging environment. I provide the GimletD GitOps repo, and I provide the remote Git address of this repo. Now, let's do this. And many things happen here, mostly because you have to set up the integration with GitHub and so on. It doesn't do it by automatically. It gives you some visibility of actually what is happening in the background. So, and it also gives you 3 steps that you have to perform. So let's do that together. First of all, let's push the configuration to Git. All right, so if I go to this GimletD demo GitOps repo and do a status, I see that I'm ahead with 1 commit. So let's look at what is that commit. Well, it's what we just made. It was bootstrapping the GitOps controller files. And if I actually do a list, now there is a staging folder and inside Flux. So I'm using Weave Flux under the hood. There are some YAMLs. So how about I'm just pushing this to origin main and get on with the steps that the bootstrap command was telling me to do. Now here comes the second one. I'm going to add the deploy key to my Git provider, which is GitHub in this case, and this deploy key is going to be a read-only deploy key, and the GitOps controller will use this deploy key to read from this one specific repository. So that's the only reason I'm comfortable having this key on screen, because the only thing you can do with it is that you will pull the very same repository as me. So let's copy this key and go to GitHub /gimlet.io GimletD demo and the GitOps repository. We just pushed stuff here, so the content is here, and I'm going to use the deploy keys. Going to name it Gimlet. Maybe add the name Flux, so I know that this is what Flux is using. I don't need write access for this, and I have added the key. Good. And next is that I need a cluster. I need to apply all these YAMLs to kickstart this GitOps loop. Let me just copy these apply commands and verify what cluster I am on. I have made an empty cluster for this purpose. And if I try to apply all the YAMLs and maybe just make this slightly larger so you will see the actual lines. So it's 5 lines, 5 YAMLs. So let's do this. And it created quite a few things. So Flux has a bunch of CRDs and a bunch of deployments now. I think like 4 deployments. So if I get the namespaces and I'm going to the Flux system namespace and get the pods, I see that Flux is actually already running. And if it is running, it should contact GitHub, try to pull everything down from the GitOps repository and deploy actually in my cluster. So I am hoping that something showed up here. Maybe not, maybe I'm missing a namespace or something, but we can definitely debug this. So there are 2 services here which are interesting. One is the source controller, which is looking at GitHub. So if I'm looking here, what I'm seeing is like every 15 seconds, there is like a tick, like a check to GitHub. It's polling GitHub, and that works quite well. So I think in a few seconds, I should see the next check. And then I can move forward to the customized controller, which is looking at the actual YAMLs inside that repository. So there was the tick. So I'm going to just do logs on the customized controller, and probably I'm going to discover that I'm missing a namespace or something. Maybe not. So it says reconciliation finished in 10 seconds, and customization is applied. So maybe everything is just fine. Maybe I'm not seeing something. Of course. So I haven't deployed the application yet. So let's just follow the steps I defined for myself in this demo. So I have a working GitOps cycle. That's cool. So everything I put in the repo is going to go down right on the cluster. So let's deploy this application manually. Now, what do I mean by that? Manually means let's put it in the GitOps repo by hand, and then have the GitOps loop synchronized down to the cluster. So you have seen the Gimlet staging YAML file, and I'm going to render that first with Gimlet manifest template. And once it is rendered, we just take a look, and then I'm going to also write it into the GitOps repo with piping the output of Gimlet manifest template into Gimlet GitOps write. So that's going to write into the GitOps repository. So let's inspect what is going on with my manifest. So, okay, because I'm not in the right folder. So I have templated the Gimlet manifest file, which pulls in a Helm chart and applies the values from that manifest file. And at the end of the day, or at the end of the render, I see 3 things. One is my deployment, a Kubernetes deployment, a Kubernetes service, because you sort of need a service for everything. And you also, in the deployment, there is also the image specified with a dummy Gimlet dummy git SHA. So this will throw an image not found error when we deploy, but we are fine with that. And since we defined some variables inside the Gimlet manifest file, it also created a config map. And there is nothing Gimlet specific in how we generate the YAMLs. Gimlet uses Helm charts, so it's just calling Helm template underneath. So it's the common tooling that you would use anyways. Now I have the template and we inspected that. I think we can just write it to GitOps and the GitOps repository. So again, I'm templating the files and writing it to the GitOps repository in the local copy. And if I go to GimletD demo GitOps and do a git log, I see that all these files have been placed and on the Git history. And if I do a Git push, maybe before that I just create a namespace if I haven't done that, because I'm unsure if there's a staging namespace right here. There is one, so I have prepared everything. So let me just, again, I am one commit ahead, so push origin main. And at this point, what we should see is a working GitOps loop, goes to GitHub, pulls down the changes, applies on the cluster. So just giving some time for the flow to work, but I'm going to flux system and just first of all checking the controller and see if things have been applied, and they have been applied just 10 or 20 seconds ago. So if everything is fine and I go to the staging namespace, I should see my application in error image pool state. That is what I expected. I have an application. Image is not pointing on the right SHA, but that's just fine for this demo for now. So as a next step, we should be installing GimletD. But before I'm doing so, I just do a recap of where we are right now. So Gimlet CLI introduced a bunch of concepts. You have seen the Gimlet manifest file. It's a short YAML file. It's like an abstraction over the Kubernetes YAML files. And it's easier to comprehend, perhaps, and it's placed in the application source code repository, so developers have to hold the control. And Gimlet CLI also introduced some repository conventions for GitOps, and that means you have an easier path into GitOps. Let me just check the stream so far. There are no comments placed yet. So if you want to just say hi, if you know me, or if you just want to do a shout out or say hi from the city you are from, I'm very happy to receive those comments, and I'm going to put those on screen. So hey world, please get me some love. Awesome. So I've shown you all this, and I'm just, again, on the conceptual level, this is what we've been doing so far. I was doing manually, but typically you would place those Gimlet commands into a shell script, and then you would call it from CI. Code change comes in, CI runs, it writes the GitOps repository, and then from Kubernetes, the GitOps controller pulls down everything. So that's a very simple way to get into GitOps, and also a nice developer experience with the manifest files. All right, so I promised you something else, like it factors out release scripting from CI. What does that even mean? So I told you about, in CI, calling these Gimlet commands, you have to check out the GitOps repository, you have to render the template, write GitOps repository, push it down, and I think you can even put these into like a shell script or like a CI plugin. But at the end of the day, you have to wire in this plugin in many different configurations, one for staging, one for production, one for your branch environments, your throwaway environments, one for rollback. And this is just the 4 basic features that typically you want to have, and that you have to replicate across all your application application pipelines, manage updates, and so on. And what I'm solving here with GimletD, and what I'm making easier, is that you don't have to do anything of this. Instead, you publish a release artifact. It's an intermediate state, like which contains all the CI meta information and everything that is needed to have a deployment later on. So this is how GimletD fits into the picture. There's a code change comes in, CI does the usual verification stuff. Instead of deploying, it just writes an artifact into the artifact store, and then GimletD just chugs along in the background, and it responds to changes in the artifact store. If there's a new artifact, it tries to match existing deploy policies, like rules like every new commit on master should go to staging. That's a policy. Or tags on production should go to tags on master or main should go to production. And it also listens to some API calls, on-demand actions. You can stop the deployment queue. You can have advanced authorization later on, or you can just do an ad hoc deploy or rollback. So GimletD is encapsulating the release logic and the workflows there are, and it writes the GitOps repo, and from there, everything is the same, really. And the GitOps controller pulls down stuff and deploys on the cluster. All right, so I've talked about a little bit about the release artifact, and this is just a glimpse into how does it look. It's a giant JSON file, and you definitely don't want to do this by hand. There are CI plugins we have implemented for different CI providers. This list is going to be extended, so we want to be integrated with every kind of CI. It's definitely a priority for us. And in this demo, I'm actually going to show you how to install GimletD, how to ship these artifacts. You won't see any of this JSON, but it's going to be shipped, how to list those artifacts, and how to release those artifacts, and how to release them continuously based on a policy. So that's where our demo continues. I just hop to the top and see if there are any comments, but not yet. So maybe next time I will be more lucky. Awesome. So back to the demo. So GimletD installation. This is going to be a bit more complex, perhaps, than the Gimlet CLI Bootstrap. Later on, we are going to make it easier, but it's out there and you can use it. There is some reference documentation. So how to install GimletD? Let me just open up the documentation. There are a bunch of YAMLs. Again, it's using one of our charts, one chart, which is like a generic Helm chart. And the basic installation is this simple. I'm actually going to just run this right away and see what does it do. I'm actually making a folder here called GimletD just to have something organized. So it was written, and there is a folder called GimletD. And it has the values YAML, which is really just the configuration I provided. I just used the latest image of GimletD, some basic stuff. And then GimletD YAML is the rendered template out of this. So this is how it looks by default. I think I need a little more than that, but I could even deploy it. But maybe I will add a few more things to it, because by default, it doesn't have anywhere to store the state. So I will just use a volume for state. So if I restart anything or whatnot, I shouldn't be starting from scratch. So I'm going to add the volume, 10 gigabytes, GimletD, and storage class. Now, that's an interesting question. I'm using a local path provisioner here. So let me just use this one. So that's the magic string I have to add to my Kubernetes cluster setup. So it's going to be a local path provisioned volume. What else do I need? Do I need an ingress? Sure, I do. I am going to expose GimletD to the world. And that is going to be gimlet.io and GimletD demo. And I have TLS set up in this cluster, so I am going to use that. I don't need a debug container. I'm not going to limit the resources. This is an empty cluster. So how about I just apply all this? So I have to re-render the templates first. Again, GimletD was written, and I need the GimletD YAML file, which has now persistent volume claim and all the bells and whistles I defined. So how about we see where we are right now? I'm in the staging namespace, and I'm in in the GimletD folder. So I'm just going to apply the GimletD YAML, which creates a bunch of stuff and gives me a warning. That's very nice of them. Some API group I'm using is not up to date. So, but just looking back, GimletD is running, and it should be backed by a disk. It is backed by a disk, so I have persistent state. And I think most important at this stage is that I have the README file. I think that's the most important. And after that, I am going to print the logs and steal the administrator key for GimletD. So it started up. It says the admin token is this one. And it also says that the GitOps worker is not running yet because I haven't configured it. That's fair because I haven't. So let me just make a note of this in the GimletD folder. Just so I will have it as future reference again. So save it. I have the admin key. Cool. And I'm going to export that actually. So how about export Gimlet token and taking the admin key. Good stuff. So I have it in my shell as well. So next step. Kickstarting the GitOps worker. Now there is a configuration section, and got it on Gimlet.io. Basically, now I have a running GimletD, and I have to configure a bunch of stuff. That's fair. So I'm going to set up a GitOps repository. Again, some deploy key generation and adding that to the manifest. And I think I'm going to do a few more things actually. So I'm going to configure GimletD, and I'm going to follow this guide here. So I'm going to generate an SSH key. That is going to be the deploy key used for GimletD to actually write the GitOps repo. So I'm going to use this command to generate the keys. It's going to be called GimletD, no passphrase, and that's it. So if I'm here, there are the public key and the private keys. So what next? Go to GitHub, settings, deploy keys. I think I already have it open. So I add a new deploy key, and I'm going to call it GimletD. And I'm going to take the public GimletD.pub and add that as a deploy key. And at this occasion, it has to be write aloud deploy key because GimletD actively wants to write the GitOps repository. So I'm adding the key here, and I have two keys now. Next thing, yeah, I have to provide the private key counterpart of this key to GimletD, and I'm going to use a very simple thing for that. I think I'm going to use this installation method where this is just going to be in a Kubernetes secret file, and I'm going to have this key verbatim in the in Git. So that's maybe not a production setup. If you have sealed secrets or some vault solution, please use that. So back in here, I am at the values YAML where I'm going to add a file secret, removing these guys. So it's basically creating a secret. This is a feature from one chart. This is the Helm chart I'm using. It's creating a secret code like this, and it's going to mount my secret files under /GitHub in the container, and I'm going to put here the deploy key as is. So let me just do that quickly. Blah, 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 and use a tab here to have the indentation. Cool. So I have it. I have the keys inside, and I'm going to, again, regenerate my YAMLs. So how did it do? Never do this, like searching bash history on a live demo. So let me just look at the README. and again have it regenerated. No, sorry, that's not it. How did I install GimletD? Installation of GimletD. I'm just going to use Helm template here. Yes. So Helm template GimletD, and I'm rewriting the YAML, and I'm going to apply the GimletD.yaml on the cluster, which restarts my pod and terminates the old one. So at this point, if I look at the logs, it should say, I haven't set two environment variables. That's fair. So I was missing, actually, I haven't copied these guys. So how about I repeat the process of setting the variables to actually tell GimletD that there are files now that it can use. The Gimlet, the GitOps repo is going to be gimlet.io/GitOpsD demos-GitOps, and the path should match up with this path. So GitHub deploy key, GitHub deploy key. So that's a match, and I'm going to regenerate now the GimletD Kubernetes YAMLs, and I'm going to apply it on the cluster like this. Again, I'm seeing it's restarted. That's cool. And shortly, it's going to be up. Shortly, it's going to be up, and it is up. And if I do the logs, it says GitOps worker started. So that's cool. It means the basic configuration of GimletD is there. And what is my next step? I kickstarted the GitOps worker. I'm also going to add Slack notifications. So that is also another configuration section. And down here, I'm going to add Slack notifications. Now there are steps how you can create an application for your Slack channel, how you can add the permissions, and how you can obtain the token for that. It's again a few more variables to the variables section. And it's going to be, I'm opening here, and I'm going to go to GimletD demo. That's my application. I made these steps previously yesterday when I was rehearsing this demo. And in auth and permissions, I have this token. So how about I have the token, and I regenerate again the YAML, and I'm going to apply the YAML, and I'm going to look at the logs. Of a different pod. It is up. I'm just hoping that the Slack integration also worked, but we will learn soon if it's otherwise. So I have Slack notifications. Cool. So at this point, we have GimletD running. It's a daemon. It has an API. Actually, if it has an API, so I should get access to that API. Remember, we have saved the deploy key, administrator key, and for later work, I'm going to actually generate another user. So when we are shipping artifacts, it's an API call, and it shouldn't use the administrator token. It should use a dedicated user token. So my next step here is that I'm going to interact with my GimletD that is deployed. First of all, I'm just going to verify if it's actually responding on the ingress, and if it has TLS in the background. I think that was already done. It is responding, and it's secure. So that's that. That's cool. So I'm going to just use the API call to create a user. And it's going to be called Circle CI. because CI is going to be the place from where I'm going to ship the release artifacts every time I have a new build. And I think that's it. Gimlet token is already in my bash, and it was HTTP 201, and I have a token for Circle CI. So let me make a copy of this. Just here and saving it as Circle CI.key. Awesome. So I have an API key, and I'm also going to save that in my bash. So export Gimlet token equals API key. And here comes the cool part. If I also export the server URL, and I already have the key, I can interact with the GimletD from the Gimlet CLI. So artifact list, it's an empty result, not an error. So it means that I was actually talking in the background to GimletD. And how could we see that? There should be a request here. Yes, there is a request. Somebody was doing a get on /API/artifacts. That is me. Cool. So this was a bunch of boilerplate, but here comes the fun part. And that fun part is actually just going back to have a small recap. This is where we are. GimletD is running. We have a CI pipeline, and we want to ship artifacts. So let's ship an artifact. An artifact, again, just a recap, the artifact is the meta information about the build, name of the image, all the variables from CI, like the common ones, maybe test results, anything. So this artifact actually could be used for auditing purposes later on. So let's ship an artifact. How to do that? There is a Circle CI orb. Now, orb is a plugin, basically. So I'm going to just, again, go to the Gimlet documentation. There is a creating artifacts section, and I'm going to extend my Circle CI config with a few things. Let's go to the Circle CI config. Few things are the orb. So that's part of the config right now. And also I'm going to add a step to my Docker build. And this step is a two-liner. First of all, I reference my Gimlet create artifact orb command, and I'm feeding in to the orb the actual image tag. So that is what we are going to ship to the Gimlet artifacts store, and a bunch of other stuff. So with these two steps, I'm almost done. I also need some credentials, and I'm using Circle CI's security contexts feature for that. And I'm using the GitHub CR, like the container registry context for container registry tokens. And I'm going to use the Gimlet context for communicating with the GimletD backend. So let's go to Circle CI and just look at my organizational settings where you can define these security contexts. It's like a bag of variables. I already made one yesterday, and I have to actually update the token part because Gimlet server, that's fine, but it's the same as yesterday. But I have to add the Gimlet token one. Name is Gimlet token. And I have to cheat and get the Circle CI key from here. Oh, I'm clicked away from this window. And I add this variable. Cool. So supposedly I have a connection to GimletD. So let me just review my notes. I made the Gimlet context. And I should trigger a build on Circle CI at this point, and hoping for the artifact to be shipped. So how to trigger this build? Let's see what's in the README file. Just some credits I have to talk about at the end. So how about I add the README file, and I'm going to ship this beautiful new artifact or new version. So I have a change set, and the change set should trigger a build. And the build is running, and it's already in the Docker build step, which should build the Docker image, and at the end should ship the artifact. So I'm really hoping an all green build here. And this is going to be fast, I think. It's this Docker file doesn't do anything really. So am I fully done? It's a success. So if we do Gimlet artifact list and it's empty, that is odd. I haven't pushed the changes to the Circle CI build, so that's a mistake we are going to fix right now. So Circle CI, and it says shipping artifacts to GimletD. So just to recap again, here we are, CI was updated, has connection to GimletD, and it's shipping artifacts on every releasable software version. And it is running. Spinning up VMs, pushing stuff. And all done. So where is my artifact? Here we are. So with the Gimlet CLI, you can have a basic overview of all the shipped artifacts. As you can see here, there is the Git information. I was pushing something just now, shipping the artifacts to GimletD. It has an artifact ID, a link to the commit, and some basic information. You can also filter down to application, branch, Git event, and a few more, since, until date. So if you are searching for a specific version to release. Now, talking about release, GimletD can work with policies or on-demand actions, and let's make an on-demand release of this artifact. So Gimlet release make. What does this need? It needs an environment and an artifact. So an environment is staging, and artifact is from our previous query. Artifact ID is this one. And boom, we fired off an on-demand or an ad hoc release event. And we also Gimlet release track. You can also track this release. It says repository not found. Did I make a mistake? Of course I did. So what's the mistake? GimletD YAML. So in the values file, I was configuring the repository. And that's a typo, my friends. No, it's GitOps demo GitOps. It's not GitOps it's GimletD demo GitOps. So I have to redeploy GimletD to configure it properly, and I have to retry with my release command. So let's just take these steps. Which was, I have to go to the GimletD folder. I have to template. I have to which in turn restarts GimletD. And once it is up, I'm just going to go right into the release command. Maybe I check for comments in the meantime. No comments, come on, please help me out here. All right. So it is running, and I'm going to just go back one folder. I'm going to release, not track, but make. And I'm going to track this new ID. Oh, I don't even need to track. I got my Slack notification right here. which was rolling out GimletD demo to staging this commit, and this is the GitOps commit. Awesome. I had a manual deploy before, so the only thing that happened is that fixing my broken Git SHA. So that's that. It also has some meta information, but later on, I will explain that later. So if I am right, it means that our deployment was fixed. It's an actual deployment running on Kubernetes, which was released through GimletD. So let's make a few changes, and then I'm going to present you how to do a rollback. And that's probably going to conclude our demo, and also the policy-based deploy. So actually, I'm going to do two things. And I have 13 more minutes, which is going to be just fine. So let's make a policy-based release. So from now on, I don't have to just manually bump every artifact to wherever environment I want it to. I'm just going to use, again, declarative approach in the application source code repository on staging. Whenever there is a change on the main branch, it should deploy. And I'm also going to change to Hello World 2, just because I want to have a few changes. And if I, again, now I have my developer hat on. I just made a change to my environment, git push origin main, and CI should run. It should ship the artifact. Let's just go here. CI should run, should ship the artifact. GimletD should get a policy match on this artifact, should write GitOps repo, and Kubernetes should have the new version because the GitOps controller, Weave Flux, awesome project, syncs everything down to the cluster. I was only speaking this much because to give some time to CI to finish the job. It is a success. I can list the artifacts actually. There was no, oh, right here. So artifact was shipped. What is going on here? No. It wasn't shipped. Why is it wasn't shipped? Because I was looking at a stale view here. So no artifact. How so? So let's look at the config, which still ships artifacts. Didn't I push or something? I think there was an error here. Yeah, I still have my changes staged in my Git. How come? I don't know. Git commit. I forgot to commit maybe. So policy-based deploys, and now push. I think I just forgot to commit. So again, I should wait for the build. In the meantime, let's look at comments. Yay! Thank you, Jula. And you are on screen. Thank you, Jula. I love it. Thanks for the support. Awesome. So 10 more minutes. I'm going to demo a rollback, and that's that. So Jula, you are the best. You are actually the second commenter on this show. First was Károly from the Hungarian Docker community last time. So thank you, Jula. And CI was done. I got my Slack notifications. Everything is deployed. And if everything is deployed, oh crap. If everything is deployed, I should be seeing this new version. If I go there, it should have my variable. Oh. Yes, it's Hello World 2. Awesome. So we made a policy-based deploy. And if I'm going to show, actually, there is another command, release list. which requires an environment and an application, which is, it's called GimletD demo. And it shows that there were 2 releases, or actually 3. So there was 1 minute ago with the policy-based deploys. Here's the git commit. Here, shipping artifacts to GimletD. That was the first one. Yes. And then here there was a bare manual deploy. So this was the ad hoc, the policy-based, and the bare manual deploy. Awesome. Last thing is to roll back, because I think this variable is making some huge errors in my deployment. This hello world 2 is bad. I should just roll back to this version, which is Gimlet rollback, release rollback, which needs an environment again. It needs an app, which is a GimletD demo, and it needs a 2. So rollback in Gimlet, you don't roll back commits, or don't roll back versions. You set a destination. So I'm going to go to this GitOps state, and I'm going to roll back. Again, I got a tracking ID, and I'm hoping everything went just fine. It says it's processed, and I should be seeing the changes in the GitOps repo. So staging, yes. So there's a revert commit, and GimletD demo in the config map has hello world again. So let's just do a final peek into what has happened. There were a few commits, and rollback actually does a git revert. So it goes back straight to that version. So there is no template re-rendering. There is no room for error, really. The only thing is that it just goes back in git versions. So it's like you get back absolutely what you have deployed before. And that concludes my demo. So just a 2 minutes recap. First of all, if you are still with me, thanks a lot. It was a very intense 1 hour with relatively few errors. I was very lucky here. So again, just a recap. GimletD builds on all the concepts that you have learned from Gimlet CLI, the manifest, the GitOps repo conventions, and so on. And it injects itself in your typical CI workflow. There is one level of indirection here, which is one part like, why am I doing this kind of question? I'm doing it because I just hate writing CI pipelines, and I hate writing the same code in all the CI pipelines and syncing them across 20, 30, 50 applications. So all the release logic, so like the CD part is taken out of CI. CI does verification very well. I moved all the release logic into GimletD, which is right now has just only the basic features, on-demand deploys, policy-based deploys, and the rollback feature. Later on, you can have additional things like you can really control this, like bake in, like you cannot deploy an artifact which hasn't been previously on the staging environment. So like these quality controls. Also, maybe you want to restrict certain people to deploy to certain environments. You can have that because GimletD has authentication. Or something went very wrong, so you want to stop all deployments. So you just halt GimletD's worker, and it gives back a pending message or something. So it opens up a bunch of possibilities and also some flexibility. So you can be sure that all the apps got the latest deployment logic. So I think that was that. I still have to show and talk about the credits, because I think first in the initial video, there was dots of lights and bouncing stuff. That was from Unsplash, or from Pexels actually. And the maker was Arvind Balagopal. I hope I pronounced your name right. So thank you for this awesome video. And also for sound, I used bensound.com, and the composer was Benjamin Tissot. So I hope this recognition is enough for all the credits and stuff. So that's again, I'd like to thank you for sticking with me this long. And I'm leaving with this very nice blue heart image. So thank you, and have a great day and lunch if you are in Europe. So goodbye.